Show again, and today I'm going to show you how to diagnose, test, and replace a bad battery, a very common cause of a no-crank condition. First, let me show you what I'm dealing with. When I open the door, the dome light is on. When I put the key in the ignition, you can see the dash lights are barely illuminated. When I turn the key, they pretty much go out. Take a look at the dome light. With the ignition in the on position, see how dim it is? When I shut it off, it glows brightly again. Right now there's a very light load on the battery. When I turn the key to the on position, I'm putting a heavier load on the battery. The battery cannot supply that amount of current, the voltage is dropping, and that's why we're getting that dim light. So what that tells me, we either have a battery that's discharged, needs to be recharged, a battery that's bad and needs to be replaced, or a connection problem, which is causing a voltage drop. Now the first thing I'm going to check is the battery, and already this doesn't look good. You can see we have heavy corrosion on the negative battery terminal. That can create a voltage drop between the terminal and the battery post and cause an issue like we have. The positive terminal actually looks pretty good. Now I'm going to measure the voltage drop of this battery when attempting to crank and with the key on. This is basically a load test using the actual vehicle instead of a load tester itself. But before I do that, I want to make sure that this corrosion here isn't causing me any issues. Should I clean it? Absolutely. But if this battery turns out to be bad, I don't want to waste my time cleaning this up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the voltage drop between the post here and the terminal. You can see we have nice clean metal here and nice clean metal here. So I'm going to do basic voltage drop test. Put one probe here, put one probe here, and I'm just going to turn the key to on to put a load on the battery, and I'm going to look at the resulting voltage drop. The key's on, and no measurable voltage drop. Ideally, you want the key to be in the start position when measuring for voltage drop to get the maximum load on the battery. But the battery in this vehicle wasn't even supplying enough current to cause the starter solenoid to click, and key on was causing a significant voltage drop based on the dim dome light. So in this case, key on was good enough. What this tells me here is this corrosion isn't my issue. That's not why this vehicle's not starting. Should I clean it? Absolutely, but that's not my issue. Now across the terminals of the battery right now we have 12.6 volts. That's a textbook example of a fully charged battery. It should have 12.6 volts across it. However, the battery right now is not being loaded. The only load it has on it right now is the memory circuits in the PCM. That's about it. The key is off, the doors are closed, the dome light's not on. So this measurement doesn't really mean anything. You have to put a load on the battery and measure the voltage drop when the battery is under load. And the voltage will drop, but it cannot drop below around 10.5 volts. That's the magic number. If when you're cranking the battery drops below 10.5 volts, you got trouble. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go inside, I'm going to turn the key to on first, and you'll be able to see the voltage drop. Then I'll attempt to crank, and you'll see that voltage drop. And that's with the key turned to on. And this is when I'm attempting to crank. Back to on. And I'm turning the key off. And with the key off, the voltage didn't come back up to where it was, but it's around 12.5 volts. And this is what I mean by under load. Right now, if you looked at that, you'd say this battery is okay. But when you load it, you see it dropped down to around 3.8 volts. And that's completely unacceptable. The PCM can't function at that voltage. The starter certainly can't function at that voltage. So basically what I did here is I load tested the battery without an actual load tester. I turned the key to on, it drew current from the battery, and we looked at the resulting voltage drop on the meter. This is exactly what a load tester does. It puts a resistive element in series with the battery, draws a certain amount of current, and you read the resulting voltage drop to determine the health of the battery. Now the problem with this is, just like a load tester, these readings are not meaningful unless the battery is fully charged. Now what this is determined for me is at least the battery is either discharged or it's bad. So the next step would be to attempt to charge the battery. I attempted to charge it, it won't hold the charge. This battery's bad, it needs to be replaced. Here's another method to test your battery. Most auto parts stores will do this for free. This is called a conductance tester. One of the main advantages of a conductance tester is the battery doesn't need to be fully charged in order to test it. This is because it doesn't put a physical load on it like a load tester does. This allows for a much quicker diagnosis. Simply attach it to the battery. And enter the cold cranking amps on the label of your battery into the tool. This battery is 875. And I can't get 875, so I just want to go lower. I'll go to 860. Hit the test button, and it'll display the cold cranking amps available from this battery. 75. And this red light here indicates that the battery's bad and it needs to be replaced. So this battery is bad, it needs to be replaced. We're done. Now it's a good idea to keep the top of your battery clean. You can see this is pretty grimy. And the reason why you want to do that is it can actually become conductive. To prove that to you, I'm going to put my negative meter probe on the negative terminal, and I'm going to touch the positive probe to the top of the battery and watch the meter. You can see we actually have a voltage. Wherever that grime is, we have a voltage. Over here it's pretty clean, so that just looks like ghost voltage, so we don't have a connection there. But over here, we definitely have current flow. So it's a good idea to keep your battery clean because this can actually discharge your battery. Whenever you disconnect the battery, you want to disconnect the negative terminal first. So I'm going to try to get as much of this corrosion off of here as possible. Now to clean this off, get a bit of warm water, mix in some baking soda, and that'll neutralize this crud right here. You could also use a battery terminal cleaner to get the heavier deposits off. What I'm going to use is this battery terminal cleaner here. It basically has a foamy consistency and it turns pink when it makes contact with battery acid. And you can see it's already turning pink. It's yellow where there isn't any acid. And I'm just going to let it work its magic, and I'll be back in a bit. Now I can just wipe off the excess. That actually looks pretty good. Look at that. Always take off the negative terminal first. Lay it off to the side where it won't make contact with the battery. Then take off the positive terminal. Whenever disconnecting a battery, remember, negative first, positive last. This is because the negative terminal is connected to the body of the vehicle. If your ratchet were to touch the body while disconnecting the positive terminal with the negative terminal still connected, you would short the battery. It's worth mentioning some vintage vehicles use what's called a positive ground, where the positive wire is connected to the body of the vehicle. In which case, you disconnect the terminals in reverse. Positive first, negative last. but all modern vehicles use a negative ground system. One's being a little stubborn. Get a screwdriver and try prying the halves apart a bit. There we go, see, that did it. There. Just a little twist was all it needed, not much at all. Different batteries will have different methods to hold them down. This particular vehicle has this block right here that's secured by one fastener. Be real careful with these because they can break. That's really rusty. I'm gonna try working it back and forth. Definitely going to put some anti-seize on this later. Definitely got to be careful. There it goes. I'm sure you heard all that noise, and that's because of all the rust on these threads. I'm going to go on my bench grinder and clean these up on the wire wheel. Then I'm going to put some anti-seize on these threads so this comes off a lot easier next time. Pull the block out. And the battery will come right out. If you want to find out what the age of your battery is, first just look for a sticker on it somewhere. Like this. Clearly says 906, September of 2006. So the battery in this vehicle lasted 9 years before failing completely.
Or you could use the date code. It's usually heat stamped into the battery somewhere. On this battery, it's stamped on the front here. You're looking at the first two digits. You'll see a number and a letter. The number corresponds to the last number of the year was manufactured here. That's a 6, so it's 2006. And the J corresponds to the month. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, J. So that's 9. You skip I because it could be mistaken for a 1. So that's 906. Exactly what it says on the label right here.
The age of your battery is very important because as batteries age, their ability to output the high current needed to power the starter diminishes. 3 to 5 years is the average lifetime for a battery. This is assuming you don't deep discharge it too many times, by leaving the door open overnight, for example. Deep discharging an SLI battery, which stands for starting, lighting, and ignition, will drastically shorten its life. SLI batteries are designed to supply a large current in the hundreds of amps for a short time to the starter to crank the engine. Then it's recharged by the alternator once the engine is started, so these batteries are never deeply discharged. Special batteries are made for this purpose called deep cycle batteries, which are designed to be deeply discharged and recharged. Generally speaking, keeping the battery fully charged, the top of the battery clean, the terminals clear of corrosion, and not deeply discharging it will prolong a battery's usable life, but it won't prolong it indefinitely. The instant they're filled with water and sulfuric acid at the factory, they begin to degrade internally. Environmental conditions such as extreme hot or cold also play a factor in battery life. Now's a good time to clean any corrosion that's fallen into the battery tray.
I'm actually going to give it another spray of this terminal cleaner. I think that looks pretty good. Again, you could do the same thing with warm water and baking soda. After it's done neutralizing the acid, be sure to rinse the terminal off with clean water. Just going to dunk the terminal in there. This fastener's definitely seen better days. Corrosion's really begun to eat away at it. Just going to remove the fastener here. After a short search, I was able to find a replacement because this one was just pretty eaten up. I'm going to take a battery terminal cleaner. You can get this from any auto parts store. Clean the inside of the terminals here. You want to install the nut so that the lipped portion on the right is facing this direction. Also clean the positive terminal. The back of the battery, as you can see there, has a lip, and when it fits under this tab here and this tab there, it locks it in place from the back. And the front of the battery has this lip, which is secured by this hold down block here that we removed earlier. Install the hold down block with the angled piece facing towards the battery. I cleaned up the threads on a wire wheel, and now I'm going to put some anti-seize on the threads so that this comes out a lot easier next time. I'm just going to rub off any excess. And we're ready to go. See, this fastener is going in a lot easier than it came out. It's not making any squeaking noises either. Even though this is a new battery, just for good measure, I'm going to clean the terminals on it. Now I'm going to put dielectric grease on the terminals. Just a thin coat is all you need. This will protect both your connectors and your battery terminals from future corrosion. I also put a tiny bit inside each connector. Now some may say dielectric grease will insulate the battery post from the terminal, but that's not true. What happens is when you put the terminal on and tighten down the fastener, the grease gets displaced. So the only place that the grease remains is where there's no metal to metal contact, and that is where corrosion can begin to form. You want to just cover the top, sides, and the base of the terminal in a thin coat of dielectric grease. And for even more protection, I also like to use a set of felt washers. When reconnecting the battery, it's the opposite of how you disconnected it. Positive terminal first. Snug it up, and then when you can't rotate the terminal anymore, it's tight enough. You can see I can still rotate it, so I'll continue tightening it. That's good. And finally, the negative terminal. And we're done.
After everything's done, I like to apply a little grease to the tops and sides of the connectors.
Like this. Just a little bit. Now I'm going to give you an after comparison. We have 12.6 volts, just as we did before. Here's with the key on. Here's while cranking.
You can see the voltage when cranking is 11.17 volts.
And now I'll show you what the test looks like on a good battery. This battery is 850 cold cranking amps. $885. This battery's good. Now on the new battery, the date code's stamped somewhere else. It's stamped in the corner here. You can see G and 5. So G is the month, 5 is the last digit of the year, 5 is 2015, and G is A, B, C, D, E, F, G. That's 7. So 715. And you can see on the side of the battery here, what does it say? Exactly that, 715.